Hi, everybody. It's Jennifer, your host of Said Differently. I have a bit of a different preamble and setup for the episodes you're going to see. We have split these up into two parts. Our guest is Brett Queener, who is the managing director of Bonfire Ventures. And we've broken our discussion with him into phase one is a dive into his experience as one of the first executives at Salesforce as they were bringing their go-to-market story to the market. And Brett, as part of Bonfire Ventures, also sits or has sat on dozens of boards in the companies he's invested in. So the first part, focusing on Salesforce's go-to-market story, is really about some lessons learned. And we really just let Brett kind of talk. I didn't really step in very much because he has so much to share from what he learned through that experience in Salesforce and their coming after Siebel in the CRM market. And I think there are a lot of parallels to that story today as we're now shifting. It's now not about moving to the cloud. It's about ushering in a new era of AI-based products. So I think some good things that we can take away from that. The second part of the discussion is really looking at his perspective as a board member and investor and how he views go-to-market storytelling and messaging for his portfolio companies and the companies he advises as a board member. So he really walks us through some steps on that and how he approaches that with his companies in his portfolio and, just kind of his take overall on the importance of story. So enjoy, and let's all learn from Brett and his amazing experience. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Said Differently, brought to you by Troop. I'm your host, Jennifer Sikora. And as you know, we are here to talk about the art and the science of go-to-market storytelling and messaging. And I'm really excited to have our guest on today, Brett Queener, who's with Bonfire Ventures. He has an incredible background of being part of the major explosion of Salesforce back in the heyday. He sits on a number of different boards of directors as an investor, board member, advisor. So really excited to bring his perspective to the table today. So Brett, could you introduce yourself a little bit more to folks?
Hi, I'm Brett, partner at Bonfire. We're a seed stage venture firm. We've got about $1 billion under management. We invest when companies have sort of $300,000-$400,000 in revenue. We join the board, and we sort of like to think of ourselves as lunch pail kids. We go to work along with our founders on this, crazy journey called startups, which, contrary to popular belief, are harder than ever. Prior to Bonfire, I've been here about 7, 8 years. Long time software executive, including stints at two of the fastest growing the two fastest growing companies, respective decades, whether it was a company called Siebel Systems in the on-premise era, or Salesforce, where I was there for more than a decade in a number of roles, including building out go-to-market, running operations, running product acquisitions, et cetera. And then after that, sort of felt like a fraud having worked for two very wealthy individuals, and joined a founder in a pre-revenue journey, which was hard and long, but provides empathy for me with founders today, which was just recently bought for quite a bit of money from SAP. So it turns out the hard work paid off.
Congratulations. Well, that's
Thank
amazing.
you.
I certainly, was dating myself way back in the day. I remember when Salesforce came out with a big, red no software symbol and, ushering the cloud or the movement from on-prem to cloud. Let's start there, Brett, if that's okay. I mean,
Sure.
one of the things we do on this show is we really like to share with people things that we've learned along the way about what it takes to have a really effective go-to-market story. And sometimes you learn from things that don't go well, and sometimes you learn from things that do go well. Can you when you think back on that era of moving from Siebel to Salesforce and moving from on-prem to the cloud story, I guess when did you come in to that piece of it in terms of shaping that story that you were bringing to market, and what jumps out at you about that? that time?
No, it was really interesting because at the time I was running marketing, real life marketing for Siebel, and I remember we were at a user conference, and Salesforce was protesting out in the streets. They were protesting us, no software.
Seriously? Like legitimately protesting?
Oh yeah, the no software thing. They were basically as people were walking into our user conference, we were very controlled, and
Oh,
in those days, the products really didn't work in on-premise days. So we'd never have like analysts talking to press, talking to like customers or prospects. It's highly, very professionally organized thing, and a bunch of the management team was super upset. Can you imagine the gall that Salesforce had to
well,
be?
yeah.
They'd hired a bunch of like extras protesting, no software, no
But they had
software, no
physical
software.
signs.
Physical signs.
Wow.
And I thought it was incredibly clever.
Mm.
I thought it was incredibly clever. And so I joined Salesforce. There's a you can check out legal proceedings, but I joined Salesforce not that much after that moment. Um, and when I think of storytelling and where do I think I joined in that journey, um, there are many people that come from Salesforce and write these books about how we did stuff. And
Yeah.
I just think they're not honest with themselves about how much differentiation we had at the moment, which was we had both a technical differentiation,
Yes, clearly.
right, which is instead of buying software, spending millions of dollars in a year, and then like it marginally being useful, and then if this vendor gave you a new piece of software, you had to start it all over again.
Yep. You had to think about hardware.
So
You had,
yeah,
yeah.
so we had and you needed all the hardware. Just
Mhm.
it was a technology model, which was in the cloud. You signed up for it. All you needed was a computer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it also we had metadata customization, which was any changes that you made, they would stay. They didn't get broken. So it changed the idea of wanting to grab new innovation from the vendor. In the past, you didn't want new innovation
Yeah.
because God forbid you have to redeploy. And then we had a business model.
Yeah.
Differentiation was instead of spending large amounts of millions of dollars up front, you just paid like 30, $40 a month. That's how it
Right.
used to be. I mean, it feels like
Yeah.
a lot of SaaS has gotten back to large amounts of money up front, which is now what I write about. My recent blog basically saying that AI is coming for that business practice.
Yes.
So that was a very high level storytelling. And so, I would say Salesforce and very few like it, but some OpenAI is pretty good at it. But like, there's a high level storytelling that you as a vendor want to play within, which is
Mhm.
the world has changed. There's a crack in the ground. The mouse has moved your cheese, and for you to be relevant,
Yeah.
you need to adjust. Right? That's like if that storytelling is relevant, it's gold. Right? And so, and I think that's what you're seeing to some extent with a lot of the excitement around AI.
Yeah.
Ignore all the $100 billion, $1 trillion like revenue swapping deals.
Yeah.
I don't know how to interpret that.
Yeah.
Which is the world's fundamentally changed, and so,
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
and then my journey really was how do we take that sort of high level messaging? And at the time, Salesforce had like, I don't know, 8 salespeople, 10 salespeople, primarily an SMB offering. It
Yeah.
had like 4 tabs. There were no dashboards. There was no customization, no API.
Yeah.
And how to position it from a storytelling perspective to basically move up market and displace, if you will, all the incumbents,
Yeah.
starting namely with Siebel,
Well, and I
which
would
is,
have to imagine there would have been a huge educational component to this as well, right? How do I get people to understand what we even mean by no software? Was it difficult to articulate the value, or was that clearly evident to people once you got into it? The no soft, the cloud aspect of it.
I think it's also important for storytelling to think of personas, right?
Yes.
And so our initial targets were smaller startups and companies that didn't come with any baggage, didn't have any deployed stuff, needed to move quick, et cetera.
Yeah.
Didn't need a super sophisticated califragilistic solution. They just needed to be able to like, hey, I want to talk to people, track prospects, close deals, et cetera.
Yeah. True.
Up market, there
Now
was a ton of
persona
education.
changes.
It
Yeah.
wasn't called really no software. It wasn't even called the cloud. Uh, it was called on demand.
Um,
And so a lot of the early days of the storytelling, even when meeting with customers, was giving them an analogy. And so the analogy we would say is, here's an apartment. We really had to explain the concept of multi-tenancy,
Yeah.
which is that if you want to live in an apartment building, you sign a lease and you get a key and you go in, and there's a set of shared services. You don't put in your own plumbing. You don't put
That's
in your
right.
own power. You don't put in your HVAC. It's there. It's built centrally. Your
Mm-hmm.
room is secure. You
Mm-hmm.
have a key to it, but
Mm-hmm.
you get to share from a cost-effective perspective in the benefit of sort of one large common investment.
It's a great
And so,
metaphor. Yeah.
so that was the investment we made all of that time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I think as we moved up market, what was very interesting to wrestle through was changing the roles of who did what. In the old world, IT did everything. And if you were in sales ops, you were a loser. Like there was some weird like sales admin job, but you
Yeah.
would gather requirements, but IT would configure dashboards.
Yeah.
IT would change workflow. IT would do everything. And we were trying to do a Salesforce, and this is the cool thing about storytelling, which is if you can do storytelling, and within that storytelling, you can take classes of people and they become much more relevant, then you create a movement. So if you think about Salesforce, I mean, it's the king of storytelling. If you go to Dreamforce, and even still
Yeah.
ignore the calls for the National Guard and Mark's heel turn and all that stuff,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's hard to.
Yes. Yes.
Um, but these were people. We moved a lot of the capability around flexibility of, oh, you want to create a dashboard, you can do it without technical skills. Oh, you want to configure workflows, you can do this. And you get into larger orgs, and IT was like, well, wait a second,
Mm-hmm.
that's my job.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
remember sitting at sales team brought me in to sit for a Dell executive dinner where like IT was here and the biz ops people were here. And it was like sitting at the dinner table between Jesus Christ and Charles Darwin. Like we were not, they were not going to agree.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so there was that. And I think part of the storytelling as you moved up market was changing, really wrestling through. And the part that I spent I spent a lot of my time at Salesforce. I spent a lot of time with founders, which is if you're trying to sell to a given persona, how do you change the frame?
Yeah.
Because historically, people
Yeah.
look at buying or evaluating solutions within a given frame,
Yes. Yes.
and competitors are coming in with their frame. You're doing it with your frame.
Mm-hmm.
And it's why I could get into like when I think about product marketing and how I measure product marketing or sales enablement, I basically measure them on like win rate,
Yep.
close rate, and sales cycle. Like that's basically what I
Yep.
measure them on.
Yeah.
Which is the second you engage with someone, beyond there's some awareness and they're interested, et cetera, it's all about framing. The
Mm-hmm.
discovery that your sales team does is about framing, showing your product within the frame that you set that the buyer bought into. They bought into your story. You're confirming the story. When
Yeah.
you bring in references, they're confirming that story.
Yeah.
And so much of it was really around competitive storytelling where I was changing the frame. And so if I think in the early days, and the question is, how do you turn a weakness into a strength? Salesforce was very simplistic.
Mm-hmm.
Siebel had been built for 15 years. The way it could do 1,000 things.
Yes. Yeah.
And we said, do your reps use it? You bought this thing in theory with all this workflow and stuff. It doesn't really help you do your job, but so they can enter and be a system record that you then have the information that then guides you what you should do from a process perspective, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is why we've bought Siebel. This is why we've spent. Okay, do your sales teams use it?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So why don't we just do a 5-day test, Siebel, Salesforce, and see which one they use?
Nice.
And because I may have 1/100th the capability, but 100 capability times 0 usage equals 0.
Right.
Whereas if we do the 10 things that really matter, not the other 90 yet, we'll get there,
Yeah.
et
Yeah.
cetera. So there was changing that framework. There was really around and then really thinking, something I spent a lot of time with my founders with is at the given moment in time, are there two or three things that you can lean on? And whether they're true or not, that they're better. If there's two or three things that you have that's different than the competition,
Hmm.
then that's what you have to lean on. And you have to drive a steel thread through the process. Um,
Yeah.
I think the other part of storytelling that we used was, this thing about before you even get to like the elements of what somebody's trying to do, I'm trying to market better, sell better, succeed better. There are these moments in time where you can get the buyer to consider what they've bought. It's not their fault, that it represents a generation or a class of type of software that they bought.
Hmm.
And if you can set the frame and show them a product that they look at and go, what is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God, I need to get off of whatever I'm using as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And if so, you can help set their frame for evaluation. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now in
Hmm.
sort of what I call non-AI SaaS to the AI sort of evaluation.
Right.